there is actually a long list of people who are extremely successful that have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And this was fascinating to me because I didn't appreciate that some of these people were. And again, I really want to point out that um, that everyone experiences this differently. We've got these main two classifications, bipolar 1 and 2, but everyone has different lengths of time. I mean, some people seem to barely experience mania, but barely meet criteria for bipolar 2, which is the DSM again says you have to have 3 days of those symptoms that I will get into in a minute. But this is fascinating. Russell Brand, of course, has a big YouTube following. He's extremely successful, very well known and renowned. Chris Brown, extremely successful. Mariah Carey. I had no idea Robert Downey Jr. Apparently. Kanye. Oh, that's the Game. Who is a rapper? Mel Gibson. I had no idea. Selena Gomez. Again, what's fascinating and important to point out here is just how, this condition, there's a lot of stigma in mental health, and this condition does not, it does not mean that you cannot live a successful life and, have a good life, especially nowadays with treatment. The mainstay, of course, being lithium, which is just fascinating because lithium is, was discovered a long time ago. It's one of the elements on the periodic table, and people generally respond very well as long as the dose is not too high. You might remember, I remember Demi Lovato was in the, she was hospitalized, and she also, I believe, shaved her hair off at one point. Same with Britney Spears. I think Britney Spears is on this list. But Demi Lovato has been in the news, and I remember her. I remember her needing some help, some intense help at one point. Baby Rexha, I had no idea. I like some of her music; it's pretty good. And then, oh yes, here's Britney Spears. The other really fascinating thing to point out here is that so bipolar gets its name from the fact that there are two poles, polar, right? So people with bipolar also primarily struggle with depressive episodes. Depression is the pole of bipolar disorder that is the most crippling. Of course, when you're depressed, you don't want to get out of bed, you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to go out. But mania is essentially the opposite. You feel very good, you're on top of the world, you're extremely energized, you don't need to sleep. Depression, you tend to sleep more and oversleep, right? So what's really sad and again really destructive for people who experience this, again, a large part of it we think is genetic, is that depression is each depressive episode is can be really hurtful for your longevity. Britney Spears also, I believe, shaved her head at one point. A lot of times these manic episodes are triggered by extreme stress, which again, I've seen that clinically time and time again. So, either a breakup, like in Kanye's case, when he lost his family and his family was falling apart, that probably triggered manic symptoms. And in the case of Britney, when you're famous, carrying that amount of fame and is extremely, can be extremely stressful, and affect your mood and how you feel and possibly trigger mania. Kanye West is on here, and Catherine Zeta-Jones. I really liked her in, I think it was Ocean's 12. But as you can see, again, the main point here is it's so cool to see all these people that are living good lives, and with proper treatment and supportive psychotherapy, that's doable, right? So here are the DSM criteria for bipolar disorder. Type 1, everybody, of course, is different, and there is really a spectrum. I really don't like the words on the spectrum anymore, because now working with people, there's a spectrum of bipolar disorder. Not everybody experiences it the same way, and the simple, we've simplified it, and the DSM simplified it and basically divided bipolarity into type 1 and 2, and it's basically on the it's essentially based on the amount of time that somebody experiences these first two bullets, so bullet 1 and bullet 2. So in bipolar type 1, this is the primary distinguishing factor, is the length of time. But in my experience in working with people, essentially you can have people experience it for a few days, and it actually changes over the lifespan, which is really interesting. People at different ages seem to experience different symptoms. And also there is no mention, I believe, here. What's really interesting to me is there is no remark about hallucinations. That's out of the scope of this video, but essentially a lot of people who experience mania will also hallucinate or hear voices in their head. But also there's a huge spectrum here. Some people experience mania for more than for a month, or it can last even longer than that. And so, when you just read the criteria, you wouldn't actually even know that. In the case of Fousey and working with people, I recently just watched a special on Kanye West. They experience periods of time in which their mood is extremely irritable. And you see this, if you've seen the clips of Fousey, he's yelling at the cops, he's yelling at everyone, he's in a car taking off his clothes, shouting, this is extremely characteristic of when someone is manic. Here are some, more sub-criteria of the second bullet. There are many points in the videos in which Fousey definitely seems grandiose. He's shouting at everyone, telling the cops that they're stupid. His self-esteem is clearly elevated. And he'd been streaming, I think, for 24 hours, which, of course, when you're manic is something that is kind of reflective of mania. And again, I don't know exactly how long this was happening, but he was, the reports were that he hadn't slept, and of course if you're doing a 24-hour stream, you're not really sleeping. And what people experience is, you feel, even though you're not sleeping, you don't really miss the sleep. You don't feel like you need to go to bed. Again, when you watch the videos, he's excessively talkative, loquacious is a great way to describe this. His speech is push and he's loud. That is very characteristic of mania. And there's pressure to keep talking. You might notice, I believe, I have to double check myself on this, but I believe Trisha Kanye has been diagnosed with bipolar, with some form of bipolar, and you will see if you watched her in the podcast, she talks extremely fast. Now, I'm not saying by any means that bipolar disorder is the only thing in which you talk fast. However, it is one of the signs. One of the things that I listen for when I'm talking with somebody to determine what their diagnosis is. Flight of ideas essentially is another way of saying thoughts that are racing. You have a lot of ideas come into your head about things to do. Fousey was in a hotel room. He was running through traffic. He was undressing himself. All that sort of stuff. Those are ideas are just racing through your head of things to do, and not. A lot of them are risky or dangerous, as you will see here. The last bullet points out that there's a lot of activities, and what's so destructive, so destructive to lives, and the whole reason, a big part of the reason that I practice the way that I do is to try to keep people with this condition out of the hospital, because when you become manic, you tend to do things that are destructive to your life, and that's really the big problem. As you see, if you watch, like in the case of Kanye West, when he was getting divorced from Kim Kardashian, he started essentially just going off the rails, and he did admit at one point that he stopped taking his medicine, and I believe the same was true for Fousey in this case, as he's not medicated. A lot of medicines, thankfully, we're living in a time that a lot of medicines can really help with these symptoms. But it's very sad to see, because it's extremely risky. A lot of the times people are spending lots like money they don't have, racking up credit card debt, engaging in risk intimate contact with multiple partners that they don't know, and doing things that put their own health and safety at risk. In Fousey's case, he was running through traffic. He was walking through traffic at one point. It's a very, I'm happy that Fousey is still alive, but he obviously needs help. And same with Kanye West. But, the real problem here is that you cannot mandate, unless someone is threatening someone else, which may or may not happen, or, actively, it's very hard to know. And of course, in the case of Fousey, a lot of the people that he's surrounded with are, kind of enabling his behavior or antagonizing him. They're not really helping him in the way that he really needs, which again is medicine and supportive therapy. In this report, in his hospitalization, a lot of people were antagonizing him. He was being swatted. That, of course, is not going to help your sense of security, because again, a lot of these people, and I'm not exactly sure in Fousey's case. It's hard to know if he's having, if he felt paranoid. That's often something that people with bipolar tend to experience, is essentially feeling like people are out to get them, that again generally results in kind of problematic behavior. I didn't really see much distractibility. There was a lot going on around him, but the increased goal-directed activity. There was, he was engaged socially, clearly. So psychomotor agitation is, I know it's extremely verbose, but essentially, he was kind of threatening, very physical, extremely agitated. I guess the key word is agitated. He was extremely agitated. In the clips of him that have surfaced in this stream, and of course, what's really interesting to point out here is at the bottom, and this is true for every single diagnosis, is that it causes the mood disturbance causes severe marked impairment or occupational social functioning, and in his case, he was hospitalized. As the cops arrested him, they, ended up figuring out that he is, pretty sick, and of course, what's really difficult oftentimes, especially in the hospital environment, is that if someone is taking some sort of drug, you have no idea, if they're actually truly bipolar, if they are hopped up on some sort of illicit substance. I believe meth. I'm not a substance use disorder specialist, but I believe meth and like cocaine can actually, if you take enough of it, can sort of mimic a lot of these symptoms of mania.